The champagne glass slipped from Zoe's fingers as she hit the cold water. Around the pool, the laughter of Ricardo's associates echoed like thunder in her ears. She surfaced, her designer dress clinging to her body, mascara running down her cheeks. Ricardo stood at the pool's edge, his expensive suit pristine, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before contradicting me in front of my business partners," he said, his voice carrying across the silent patio of their Austin mansion. But as Zoe pulled herself out of the pool, water dripping from her trembling form, something shifted in her eyes. The love that had once shone there was dying, replaced by something cold and calculating. Ricardo had no idea he had just destroyed the one person who truly loved him, and awakened the most dangerous enemy he would ever face. Welcome back to Mafia and Romance. We're about to witness a love story that transforms into the ultimate revenge. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything and helps us bring you these incredible emotional journeys. 3 hours earlier, Zoe Williams had been gazing at her husband with pure adoration as he conducted business on the sprawling patio of their Texas estate. The evening air was warm, filled with the scent of barbecue and expensive cigars. Ricardo's associates from the Dallas territory had come to discuss expansion into Houston, and Zoe knew her role: look beautiful, stay silent, and serve drinks when needed. She had been doing exactly that for the past 2 years of their marriage, not out of fear or obligation, but out of genuine love and respect for the man who had swept her off her feet. Ricardo had found her when she was working as a paralegal in downtown Austin, struggling to make ends meet after her father's medical bills had drained their family's savings. He had been her knight in shining armor, rescuing her from a life of financial desperation and giving her a world of luxury she had never imagined. "The Houston ports are crucial for our operations," Ricardo was saying, his deep voice commanding attention from the 6 men seated around the outdoor table. "We need someone reliable overseeing the shipments." Zoe moved gracefully between the men, refilling glasses and emptying ashtrays. She had learned about Ricardo's real business gradually after their wedding, but instead of being horrified, she had chosen to stand by him. She believed in the man she had married, trusted that everything he did was necessary to protect their life together. Her legal training helped her understand the complexities of his operations, but she used that knowledge only to support him, never to question his decisions. "What about the Rossi family?" asked Vincent, Ricardo's lieutenant. "They've been sniffing around the Port Authority." "The Rossis are finished in Texas," Ricardo replied with cold certainty. "After what happened to their operations in San Antonio, they don't have the resources to challenge us." Zoe felt a familiar flutter of pride watching her husband command such respect and fear. This was the man who held her tenderly every night, who brought her flowers for no reason, who had promised to give her the world. She had seen his gentle side, the vulnerability he showed only to her, and it made her love him even more fiercely. "Still," Vincent continued, "we should be careful. They might try something desperate." "Let them try," Ricardo laughed, reaching out to grab Zoe's wrist as she passed. "My wife here could probably handle the Rossis better than they can handle themselves. Isn't that right, beautiful?" The men chuckled, but Zoe felt a warm glow at his praise. "Of course, darling," she replied with genuine affection, leaning down to kiss his cheek. But then Vincent made a comment that changed everything. "Speaking of handling things, Ricardo, your approach to the Port Authority might be too aggressive. If we push too hard, we risk federal attention." Ricardo's grip on Zoe's wrist tightened slightly. "Are you questioning my judgment, Vincent?" "I'm just saying we should consider a more subtle approach. Maybe work through legitimate channels first." The tension around the table was palpable. Zoe could feel Ricardo's anger building, and her heart ached for him. She knew how hard he worked, how much pressure he was under to maintain his position. Without thinking, she spoke up to support the man she loved. "Vincent's right," Zoe said quietly, setting down the wine bottle. "A direct approach could trigger an investigation. If you establish legitimate business relationships first, you create a cover for any other activities." The silence that followed was deafening. Ricardo's associates stared at her in shock. In their world, wives didn't speak during business meetings. They certainly didn't offer strategic advice. But Zoe had only been trying to help. She had seen the stress Ricardo was under, the weight of leadership on his shoulders, and she wanted to use her legal knowledge to support him. She thought he would appreciate her insight, maybe even be proud of her intelligence. Instead, Ricardo's face darkened. "Excuse me?" Zoe realized her mistake immediately, but something inside her refused to back down completely. She loved this man with every fiber of her being, and she had only been trying to help him succeed. "I'm just saying that Vincent has a point. Sometimes patience is more effective than force." The sound of Ricardo's chair scraping against the stone patio filled the air as he stood slowly. His eyes were cold, calculating, a look Zoe had never seen directed at her before. This wasn't the tender husband who whispered sweet words in her ear. This was the dangerous man who commanded fear throughout Texas. "Gentlemen," Ricardo said, his voice dangerously quiet, "it seems my wife has forgotten her place." What happened next shattered Zoe's world. Ricardo grabbed her arm, not gently as he usually did, but with a firmness that bordered on violence. She thought he was just going to scold her privately. Maybe explain why she shouldn't speak during business meetings. She trusted him completely, even in her confusion. She never expected him to push her into the pool. The water was shockingly cold against her skin. When she surfaced, gasping and disoriented, the laughter of Ricardo's associates rang in her ears like a death knell. But it was Ricardo's words that truly destroyed her. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before contradicting me in front of my business partners." As Zoe pulled herself out of the pool, her designer dress ruined, her hair plastered to her head, she felt her heart breaking in real time. The man she had loved unconditionally, the man she had trusted with her life and soul, had just humiliated her in the cruelest way possible, and he was laughing about it. Ricardo was already back at the table, accepting congratulations from his men for putting his woman in her place. They were toasting his dominance, celebrating her humiliation, and he was basking in their approval. The tender husband who had held her through nightmares was gone, replaced by a stranger who could destroy her dignity for the sake of his reputation. Zoe stood dripping by the pool, and for the first time in 2 years, she really saw her husband clearly. The cruel satisfaction in his smile, the way he fed off her humiliation, the complete absence of remorse or love in his eyes. She had been blind to this side of him, choosing to see only the man who brought her flowers and whispered promises in the dark. "I'll go change," she said quietly, her voice steady despite her shattered heart. Ricardo waved her away dismissively, as if she were a servant rather than the woman who had given him everything. "Yes, go make yourself presentable, and bring us another bottle of the good whiskey when you come back." Zoe nodded and walked toward the house, her heels squelching with each step. Behind her, she could hear Ricardo regaling his associates with stories of other times he had disciplined difficult women. Each word was a dagger through her heart, destroying every beautiful memory they had built together. But as Zoe climbed the stairs to their bedroom, something was crystallizing in her mind. The love that had defined her for 2 years was dying, but it wasn't disappearing. It was transforming into something else entirely. Something cold and focused and absolutely ruthless, because Zoe Williams hadn't always been a paralegal struggling to pay bills. Before her father's illness had derailed her plans, she had been something else entirely. Something Ricardo had never bothered to ask about, too focused on her beauty and gratitude to dig deeper into her past. As she reached their bedroom door, Zoe allowed herself a small, bitter smile. Ricardo thought he had just taught her a lesson about knowing her place. He had no idea that he had just awakened something that would make him regret ever laying eyes on her. The woman who had loved him unconditionally was dead, drowned in that pool along with her dignity. What emerged was someone far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The next morning, Ricardo woke to the smell of his favorite breakfast, eggs Benedict with fresh hollandaise, perfectly brewed Colombian coffee, and crispy bacon. Zoe was already dressed and moving around their bedroom, laying out his clothes for the day with the same efficiency she had shown for 2 years. "Good morning, darling," she said, her voice warm and pleasant. There was no trace of the humiliation from the night before, no hint of anger or resentment. If anything, she seemed more attentive than usual. Ricardo stretched in their king-sized bed, satisfied. The lesson had worked. Zoe understood her place now, and everything was back to normal. "Morning, beautiful. That smells incredible." "I thought you might be hungry after last night's meeting," Zoe replied, setting a breakfast tray across his lap. "How did the rest of the discussion go?" "Perfectly. Vincent and the others understood that I don't tolerate challenges to my authority." Ricardo cut into his eggs, savoring the rich yolk. "Sometimes you have to make examples, you know. Show everyone who's really in charge." "Of course," Zoe agreed, sitting on the edge of the bed. But inside, her heart was screaming. This man, who had once told her she was his equal, his partner in everything, was now talking about making an example of her. "I'm sorry I spoke out of turn. It won't happen again." Ricardo reached out and cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone in a gesture that had once made her melt. Now it felt like a mockery of the love they had shared. "I know it won't. You're a smart woman, Zoe. That's one of the things I love about you. But smart women need to know when to use their intelligence and when to stay quiet." "You're absolutely right," she said, leaning into his touch while her soul died a little more. "I've learned my lesson." But as Ricardo ate his breakfast and prepared for his day, he missed the subtle changes in his wife's behavior. He didn't notice how she watched him with new intensity, cataloguing his habits and routines. He didn't see how she lingered near his office door when he made phone calls, or how she had started asking innocent questions about his business associates. The truth was, Zoe's legal background was far more extensive than Ricardo had ever bothered to discover. Before her father's illness, she hadn't just been studying to be a paralegal. She had been in her final year of law school, specializing in criminal law and corporate litigation. She had been planning to work for the district attorney's office, using her skills to prosecute exactly the kind of criminals her husband had turned out to be. But love had made her abandon those dreams. Love had made her choose Ricardo's world over justice. Love had made her complicit in crimes she had once sworn to fight against, now that love was dead, and with it, all the moral compromises she had made for his sake. Over the following days, Zoe became the perfect wife. She anticipated Ricardo's needs, managed his schedule flawlessly, and never once contradicted him in public. She hosted dinner parties for his associates, charmed potential business partners, and played her role with Academy Award-worthy performance. Ricardo was pleased. The pool incident had been exactly what Zoe needed to understand their dynamic. She was more beautiful than ever, more attentive, more devoted. He began to brag to his associates about how well he had trained his wife. What Ricardo didn't know was that Zoe was using her newfound submissiveness as cover for something much more dangerous. While he slept, she was in his office, photographing documents with her phone. While he showered, she was copying files from his computer onto encrypted drives. While he conducted business meetings, she was memorizing names, dates, and locations. Her legal training made her uniquely qualified to understand the implications of what she was discovering. Ricardo's empire was vast, but vulnerable. His arrogance had made him careless, and his trust in Zoe's newfound obedience was about to become his greatest weakness. But this wasn't about justice anymore. This was about revenge. This was about making the man who had destroyed her love pay for every moment of humiliation, every casual cruelty, every time he had chosen his reputation over her heart. 3 weeks after the pool incident, Zoe made her first move. "Darling," she said over dinner, "I've been thinking about what you said about the Houston ports." Ricardo looked up from his steak, mildly interested. "Oh?" "Well, you mentioned that the Rossi family might try something desperate. What if they're already planning something? What if they have someone on the inside feeding them information?" "Impossible," Ricardo said dismissively. "My security is airtight." "I'm sure it is," and Zoe agreed, though inside she was calculating exactly how to prove him wrong. "But what if the leak isn't from your security team? What if it's from someone closer, someone who has access to your office, your files, your conversations?" Ricardo's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Zoe said carefully. "I'm just worried about you, about us. If there is a leak and if something happens to you because of it." She let her voice trail off, allowing tears to gather in her eyes. Tears that were real, but not for the reasons Ricardo thought. "Hey," Ricardo reached across the table to take her hand. "Nothing's going to happen to me, but you're right to be concerned. Maybe I should look into tightening security around the house." "That's a good idea," Zoe said, squeezing his hand while her mind raced with possibilities. "And maybe you should test some of your closest associates. See if anyone reacts strangely to certain information." Ricardo's eyes sharpened. This was exactly the kind of strategic thinking that had made him fall for Zoe in the first place. "You know what? That's brilliant. I'll feed different information to different people and see what comes back to me." "Just be careful," Zoe said. "If there really is a traitor in your organization, they might be more dangerous than you think." That night, Ricardo implemented Zoe's suggestion, never realizing that he was following a plan designed to destroy him. He told Vincent that he was planning to move operations to the port of Galveston. He told another associate that he was focusing on Corpus Christi. To a third, he mentioned Beaumont. Each man received different false information about timing and logistics, but Zoe had her own plan. Using contacts she had cultivated during her law school days, classmates who now worked in law enforcement, professors who had connections throughout the justice system, she began feeding information to the authorities. Not as an FBI agent, but as a woman seeking revenge against the man who had broken her heart. Within a week, Ricardo had his answer. Information about the Galveston operation had somehow reached the Rossi family. Vincent was the leak. Ricardo's response was swift and brutal. Vincent disappeared, and his body was found in a warehouse outside Dallas 3 days later. The message was clear. Betrayal would not be tolerated. But what Ricardo didn't realize was that Zoe had orchestrated the entire thing. She had been the one feeding information to the Rossis, using encrypted communications and anonymous tips. She had made sure that only the information given to Vincent would reach them, ensuring that he would be identified as the traitor. Vincent had been Ricardo's most loyal lieutenant, a man who had served the Ancelotti family for over a decade. His elimination created a power vacuum that Zoe was already prepared to exploit. But more than that, it proved to her that Ricardo was capable of murdering innocent people to protect his reputation. The same reputation he had chosen over her dignity that night by the pool. "I'm so sorry about Vincent," she said as Ricardo returned home from dealing with the situation, his clothes stained with blood that made her stomach turn. "I know how much you trusted him." "Trust is a luxury I can't afford anymore," Ricardo replied, his voice hard. "From now on, I'm keeping my circle very small. Only people I absolutely know I can trust." "That's wise," Zoe said, helping him out of his blood-stained jacket while her heart broke all over again. This was the man she had loved, the man she had planned to spend her life with. Now she was helping him clean up after a murder. "Who can you really trust completely?" Ricardo looked at her, his wife who had helped him identify the traitor, who had shown such concern for his safety, who had proven her loyalty beyond question. "You," he said simply. "I can trust you." Zoe smiled, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him softly, tasting the lie on her lips. "Always, darling, always." As Ricardo held her close, breathing in the scent of her perfume, he felt more secure than he had in years. He had eliminated a threat to his organization, tightened his security, and confirmed the absolute loyalty of the person closest to him. He had no idea that he had just handed complete access to his empire to a woman whose love had curdled into something infinitely more dangerous than hatred. 2 months after Vincent's death, Ricardo's organization was running more smoothly than ever. With Zoe's help, he had restructured his operations, implemented new security protocols, and expanded into 3 new territories. She had become his unofficial advisor, the person he turned to when he needed to think through complex problems. "You have a gift for this," he told her one evening, as they reviewed profit reports in his office. "Maybe I should make you an official part of the business." Zoe looked up from the financial documents she had been studying, documents that would soon find their way to federal prosecutors. "I'm flattered, but I'm happy just helping you informally. Besides, your associates might not appreciate taking orders from a woman." "They'd learn to appreciate it," Ricardo said, pulling her onto his lap. "You've already proven yourself more valuable than most of them." It was true. In the weeks following Vincent's elimination, Zoe had helped Ricardo identify and solve problems that had been plaguing his organization for months. She had suggested new money laundering techniques, identified potential security vulnerabilities, and even helped negotiate a truce with a rival family in San Antonio. What Ricardo didn't realize was that every solution Zoe provided came with a hidden cost. Every suggestion she made was designed to give her more access, more information, and more evidence. She was systematically documenting every aspect of his criminal empire while making it seem like she was helping him strengthen it. "There is one thing that's been bothering me," Zoe said, tracing patterns on his chest, while her heart ached with the memory of when such gestures had been born of love rather than manipulation. "The way you handled the situation with Vincent was perfect, but I'm worried about the other associates. They might be scared, wondering if they're next." "Good," Ricardo replied. "Fear keeps people loyal." "To a point," Zoe agreed. "But too much fear can make people desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, or worse, they make deals with your enemies." Ricardo considered this. "What do you suggest?" "Maybe it's time to show them some reward along with the punishment. Promote someone, give them Vincent's territory, show them that loyalty is rewarded as much as betrayal is punished." "Who would you suggest?" Zoe had been waiting for this question. "Marcus Chen. He's been with you for 5 years. He's smart and he's hungry. Plus, he doesn't have the kind of family connections that might make him think he deserves more than he's getting." Ricardo nodded slowly. Marcus was a good choice, ambitious but not threatening, capable but not brilliant. "I'll talk to him tomorrow." "There's something else," Zoe said, her voice carefully casual. "I think you should give him a test first, something important but not critical. See how he handles real responsibility." "Like what?" "The new Houston operation. It's significant enough to matter, but if something goes wrong, it won't destroy everything you've built." Ricardo was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, he nodded. "You're right. Marcus gets Houston, but I'll keep close watch on how he handles it." The next day, Ricardo called Marcus into his office and offered him Vincent's old territory, including oversight of the Houston expansion. Marcus was thrilled, grateful, and completely unaware that his promotion was part of a larger game. What Marcus also didn't know was that Zoe had already identified his weakness. Through careful research, she had discovered that Marcus's younger sister, Eleanor, worked as a nurse at Austin General Hospital and was drowning in student loan debt. Eleanor was sweet, naive, and desperately in love with a resident doctor who barely knew she existed. Zoe had accidentally met Elena at a charity fundraiser and had struck up a friendship over their shared interest in helping underprivileged children. Over coffee dates and shopping trips, Zoe had learned everything about Marcus's family, his weaknesses, and his fears. Now with Marcus in charge of Houston operations, Zoe had a direct line into Ricardo's most important new venture. Eleanor, grateful for Zoe's friendship and desperate for money to pay off her loans, was happy to pass along information about her brother's work. She thought she was just gossiping with a friend. She had no idea she was feeding intelligence to someone who was systematically dismantling her brother's boss's empire. But this wasn't about justice anymore. This was personal. This was about making Ricardo pay for every moment of humiliation, every casual dismissal of her intelligence, every time he had chosen his reputation over her feelings. "Marcus is doing well with Houston," Ricardo told Zoe a few weeks later. "The first shipments went through without any problems." "That's wonderful," Zoe replied, though she already knew about the shipments. She knew their contents, their destinations, and their value. She also knew that the next shipment would be intercepted by federal agents, thanks to an anonymous tip that would be traced back to Marcus's careless handling of security protocols. "I'm thinking of giving him more responsibility," Ricardo continued. "Maybe put him in charge of the new money laundering operation through the art galleries." "That sounds like a big step," Zoe said carefully. "Are you sure he's ready for something that complex? You think he's not?" "I think he's capable, but maybe he should prove himself with Houston first. You don't want to overwhelm him and risk having him make mistakes that could expose the whole operation." Ricardo nodded. "You're probably right. Better to be cautious." But Zoe's real concern wasn't about Marcus being overwhelmed. She needed time to position herself for the next phase of her plan. When Marcus inevitably fell, She wanted to be the obvious choice to take over his responsibilities. That night, while Ricardo slept peacefully beside her, Zoe made a series of encrypted phone calls from the burner phone she kept hidden in her car. She spoke to contacts in law enforcement, federal agencies, and the media. She provided information about shipment schedules, financial transactions, and key personnel. But she was careful to protect the most important assets, the ones she would need when she took control. The next morning, she woke early to make Ricardo's breakfast, just as she had every day for the past 3 months. She was the perfect wife, the devoted partner, the trusted advisor. And with each passing day, she was tightening the noose around his neck. "I love you," Ricardo said as she handed him his coffee, the words that had once made her heart sore now cutting through her like knives. "I love you too," Zoe replied, kissing his forehead while her soul screamed in agony. Because she did still love him, in a twisted, broken way. She loved the man he had been before that night by the pool. She loved the memory of their happiness, and that made her revenge all the more devastating. As Ricardo left for work that morning, Zoe stood at their bedroom window and watched his car disappear down their long driveway. In 3 days, Marcus would be arrested. In a week, 2 more of Ricardo's key associates would be indicted, and in 2 weeks Ricardo would be facing the complete collapse of everything he had built. He still thought she was the loving, devoted wife who would stand by him through anything. He had no idea that she had become his executioner, and that every kiss, every tender moment, every declaration of love was just another step toward his destruction. The woman who had loved him unconditionally was dead, drowned in that pool along with her dignity. What remained was something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The first crack in Ricardo's empire appeared on a Tuesday morning in November. Marcus Chen was arrested at his Houston warehouse along with 6 other associates, caught with $3 million worth of cocaine and enough evidence to put them away for life. The bust was so perfectly timed and executed that it was clear the authorities had inside information. Ricardo's phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Zoe watched from their bed as he answered, his face growing darker with each word. When he hung up, he was silent for a long moment. "Marcus?" she asked softly, though her heart was racing with a mixture of triumph and terror. "Gone, along with the entire Houston operation." Ricardo's voice was flat, dangerous. Someone talked. "Oh my God," Zoe breathed, sitting up in bed. "Are you safe? Could they trace anything back to you?" "I don't know." Ricardo was already getting dressed, his movements sharp and angry. "I need to get to the office, start damage control. Should I come with you?" "No. Stay here. If this goes bad, I might need you to." He paused, looking at her with an expression that broke her heart all over again. For a moment, she saw the man she had fallen in love with, vulnerable, scared, needing her support. "I might need you to disappear for a while." Zoe nodded, playing the frightened wife perfectly while inside she was screaming, "Whatever you need me to do." Ricardo kissed her forehead, a gesture that might have been tender if his hands weren't shaking with rage. "I'll call you when I know more." After he left, Zoe allowed herself a moment of pure anguish. This was the man she had loved more than life itself, and she was destroying him piece by piece. But then she remembered the pool, the laughter of his associates, the way he had dismissed her humiliation, as if she were nothing more than a disobedient pet. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena Chen. "My brother was arrested. I don't understand what's happening. Can we meet for coffee?" Zoe typed back quickly. "Of course, honey, I'm so sorry. Let's meet at our usual place in an hour." An hour later, Zoe sat across from Elena in a small cafe in downtown Austin, listening to the young woman sob about her brother's arrest. Elena was convinced it was all a mistake, that Marcus would never be involved in anything illegal. "I just don't understand," Elena kept saying. "Marcus is a good person. He helps support our parents. He paid for my nursing school. He would never do drugs. Sometimes people we love surprise us," Zoe said gently, reaching across the table to squeeze Elena's hand while her own heart shattered. "Sometimes they're involved in things we never suspected." "But the police said he was running some kind of drug operation. That's impossible. Marcus barely drinks alcohol." Zoe nodded sympathetically, but inside she was calculating. Eleanor's shock and denial were genuine, which meant Marcus had kept his real work hidden from his family. That was good. It meant there would be no awkward questions about how Zoe had known so much about his activities. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Zoe asked. "Do you need money for a lawyer?" "I don't know," Elena said, wiping her eyes. "My parents are talking about selling their house to pay for legal fees. This is going to destroy our family. Don't worry about money right now," Zoe said firmly. "I'll help however I can. That's what friends are for." Eleanor's gratitude was heartbreaking and genuine. She had no idea that her friend was the reason her brother was sitting in a federal holding cell, facing life in prison. When Zoe returned home that afternoon, she found Ricardo in his office, surrounded by documents and talking rapidly on his phone. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. She had never seen him look so rattled. "No, I don't care what it costs," he was saying. "I want the best lawyers money can buy, and I want to know how the feds got their information." He hung up and looked at Zoe with exhausted eyes. "3 more arrests this afternoon. The feds are moving fast." "Who?" Zoe asked, though she already knew. "Tommy Ricci, Dave Santos, and Mike Torres, all of them connected to the Houston operation." Ricardo rubbed his face with his hands. "Someone gave them everything, Zoe. Names, dates, locations. This wasn't just a lucky bust. Could it be Marcus? Maybe he made a deal?" "Maybe, but the timing doesn't work. The warrants were issued before his arrest. Someone else was feeding them information." Zoe moved behind his chair and began massaging his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles while her heart broke for the man she was destroying. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find out who betrayed me," Ricardo said, his voice cold. "And when I do, they're going to wish they had never been born." "Be careful," Zoe said softly. "If the feds are watching your organization this closely, you can't afford to make any moves that might give them more evidence." "I know," Ricardo said, leaning back against her. "God, Zoe, I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the only person I can trust completely." "You can always trust me," she said, continuing to massage his shoulders while tears streamed silently down her face. "Always." But even as she comforted him, Zoe was planning her next move. The arrests had been the opening gambit. Now she needed to escalate the pressure, make Ricardo even more dependent on her, while systematically destroying his remaining power base. That evening, while Ricardo was on the phone with his lawyers, Zoe made her own calls from her burner phone. But these weren't to law enforcement agencies. These were to journalists, to victims' families, to anyone who had a reason to want Riccardo Ancelotti brought down. "It's me," she said when a familiar voice answered. "Phase 1 is complete. Are you ready for Phase 2? "We've been ready for months," the voice replied. "Just give us the word." "Soon," Zoe said. "I need him completely isolated first. No allies, no backup plans. When we move, it has to be final." "Understood. What about the timeline?" 2 weeks, maybe less if he starts getting suspicious." "He won't," the voice said with confidence. "You've played this perfectly." Zoe smiled bitterly, looking through the office window at Ricardo's silhouette as he paced back and forth, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, I have." When she hung up, Zoe felt a familiar surge of satisfaction mixed with devastating grief. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. Ricardo's empire was crumbling, his associates were being arrested one by one, and he was becoming increasingly dependent on her for emotional support and strategic advice. Soon, very soon, it would be time for the final act. The moment when Riccardo Ancelotti would learn exactly what his wife was capable of, and how completely he had underestimated the woman whose love he had destroyed. But first, she needed to make sure he was completely broken, completely dependent, completely under her control. The pool incident had been his last moment of power over her. Everything since then had been her game, played by her rules, and she was very, very good at this game. The end came on a cold December morning, exactly 4 months after Ricardo had pushed Zoe into the pool. He woke to find her side of the bed empty, and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then he noticed the envelope on her pillow. His name was written on it in Zoe's careful handwriting. Ricardo's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 words, "Conference room, now." He dressed quickly, his mind racing. In the past 2 weeks, his organization had been decimated. 12 associates arrested, 4 warehouses raided, 6 bank accounts frozen. His lawyers were telling him to prepare for the worst. His remaining allies were distancing themselves. His empire was collapsing around him. The conference room was in the east wing of their mansion, a space Ricardo used for important meetings. As he approached, he could hear voices inside, multiple voices. His blood ran cold. He opened the door and stopped dead. Zoe sat at the head of the long mahogany table, wearing a crisp black business suit he had never seen before. Around the table sat 8 people Ricardo didn't recognize, lawyers, journalists, and what appeared to be federal agents. At the far end of the table sat a woman Ricardo knew only by reputation, District Attorney Sarah Morrison. "Good morning, Ricardo," Zoe said, her voice calm and professional. "Please, sit down." Ricardo remained frozen in the doorway. "What is this?" "This," Zoe said, standing slowly, "is justice." She walked around the table toward him, and Ricardo saw something in her eyes he had never seen before. Not fear, not submission, not love. Power. Cold, calculating, absolute power. "My name is Zoe Williams," she said, stopping just inches from him. "And for the past 4 months, I've been systematically destroying your criminal empire." The words hit Ricardo like physical blows. "That's impossible. You love me. We're married." "I did love you," Zoe said, her voice breaking slightly. "I loved you more than life itself. I would have done anything for you, been anything you needed me to be." She walked back to her seat, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Until you pushed me into that pool and showed me exactly what I meant to you." "Zoe, please," Ricardo said, his voice desperate. "That was a mistake. I was angry. I wasn't thinking." "You weren't thinking about me," Zoe interrupted. "You were thinking about your reputation, your image, your need to dominate and control. You humiliated the woman who loved you unconditionally, and you laughed about it." She opened a thick folder and began laying out photographs on the table. Financial records showing money laundering through your restaurants, recorded conversations detailing drug shipments, video evidence of you ordering Vincent's execution. With each piece of evidence, Ricardo felt his world crumbling further. "You recorded me." "For 4 months," Zoe said. "Every conversation in your office, every phone call from the house, every meeting with your associates. I had access to everything, because you trusted me with everything." "The advice you gave me," Ricardo said, pieces falling into place. "The strategic suggestions, the security improvements, were designed to give me more access and more evidence," Zoe finished. "You thought I was helping you strengthen your organization. In reality, I was building the case that will put you away forever." Ricardo's mind flashed back to dozens of conversations, moments when Zoe had suggested new approaches or identified potential problems. She had been so helpful, so insightful. He had fallen in love with her intelligence as much as her beauty, and she had used that intelligence to destroy him. "Vincent," he said suddenly. "You killed Vincent." "Vincent was collateral damage," Zoe replied, though her voice wavered slightly. "I needed you to trust me completely, and his sacrifice accomplished that goal. You made me murder an innocent man." "You made that choice yourself," Zoe said firmly. "I simply provided the information. You decided to kill him rather than investigate further. That's on you, Ricardo. That's who you really are." District Attorney Morrison spoke for the first time. "Mr. Ancelotti, you're under arrest for racketeering, drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder." But Ricardo wasn't looking at the DA. He was staring at Zoe, trying to reconcile the woman he had loved with the person who had destroyed him. "Did any of it mean anything?" he asked quietly. "The marriage, the time we spent together, the way you looked at me." For just a moment, Zoe's professional mask slipped, and Ricardo saw the woman he had fallen in love with. "You want to know what meant something to me, Ricardo? Every morning I woke up next to you and remembered that you chose your reputation over my dignity. Every time you touched me and I had to pretend I still loved you. Every night I lay awake planning your destruction while you slept peacefully beside me." She stood up, smoothing down her suit jacket. "That was what meant something to me. The knowledge that the man who had humiliated me was going to pay for every moment of pain he caused. The agents moved to arrest him, but Ricardo held up a hand. Wait. He looked at Zoe one more time. The woman I fell in love with, was she real at all? Zoe considered the question, and when she answered, her voice was thick with emotion. She was real, Ricardo. She loved you completely, trusted you absolutely, would have done anything for you, but you killed her that night by the pool. You drowned her in front of your friends and laughed about it. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Ricardo felt the last of his power drain away. The man who had commanded fear and respect throughout Texas was being led away by federal agents, betrayed by the woman he had trusted most. One more thing, Zoe called as they reached the door. Ricardo turned back to look at her. That advice I gave you about the Houston ports, about being patient instead of using force, that was the woman who loved you trying to save you from yourself. But you couldn't help yourself, could you? You had to prove your dominance, you had to push me into that pool. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only infinite sadness. Congratulations, Ricardo. You destroyed the only person who ever truly loved you. As Ricardo was led away, Zoe remained in the conference room, surrounded by evidence of the case that had consumed 4 months of her life. District Attorney Morrison approached her. Outstanding work, Mrs. Ancelotti. This is the biggest organized crime takedown in Texas history. Thank you, Zoe replied, but her voice was hollow. It's been a long 4 months. I imagine it has. What will you do now? Zoe looked around the room, at the photographs and documents that represented the destruction of Ricardo's empire. I don't know. Start over, I suppose. Try to figure out who I am when I'm not planning someone's destruction. As the officials filed out of the room, Zoe was left alone with the wreckage of her marriage and her revenge. She thought about the pool, about the humiliation, about the moment she had decided to stop being a victim and start being an executioner. Ricardo had thought he was teaching her a lesson about power. Instead, he had learned one himself. The woman who had loved him was gone, and in her place was someone who had proven that love, when betrayed, could become the most devastating weapon of all. Some time later, Zoe stood in the courtroom as the judge read Ricardo's sentence, life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Around her, the families of Ricardo's victims wept with relief. Justice had finally been served. Ricardo looked older, broken. The confident mafia boss who had once commanded an empire was gone, replaced by a man who had lost everything. As the bailiffs led him away, he looked at Zoe one last time. She met his gaze steadily, and for a moment she saw the man she had once loved looking back at her. Then he was gone, and Zoe was left alone with the weight of what she had accomplished. After the trial, Zoe returned to the life she had abandoned years ago. She finished her law degree, passed the bar exam, and began working for the district attorney's office, the career she had given up for love. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now prosecuting the same kinds of criminals she had once helped. Sometimes late at night, she thought about the pool, about the moment that had changed everything. Ricardo had thought he was asserting his dominance, showing her who was in control. Instead, he had awakened something in her that he never could have imagined. The woman who had emerged from that pool, dripping and humiliated, had been someone new entirely. Not the submissive wife, not the devoted partner, but a force of nature who had dedicated herself to bringing down the man who had broken her heart. He had pushed her into the water, thinking it would be her humiliation. He never knew it would be his last moment of power over anyone. But victory felt hollow. She had won, but at the cost of everything she had once held dear. The love that had defined her was gone, replaced by a cold satisfaction that felt more like grief than triumph. As Zoe looked out at the city lights from her new apartment, she realized that Ricardo had been right about one thing. She had learned her place, but it wasn't the place he had intended to teach her. Her place was on the side of justice, using her intelligence and determination to protect others from men like the one she had once loved. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was the life his cruelty had created, and perhaps in time it would be enough. Another powerful story comes to an end here at Mafia and Romance. If this tale of love turned to revenge moved you, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments how this story made you feel. Your support helps us continue bringing these intense emotional journeys to life. Until our next story.